Unmute, he's asking?
I'm not sure.
He says we're good.
Oh, we're good. All right, great. I just see my picture, though, just out of curiosity, which is not a fun thing to see.
Was-
If you can hear me, just hang on one sec.
Yeah.
That's Nelson's report. Oh, you know it? You can't send it unless we're post. Sorry.
That's okay.
He comes to all our softball games.
Mr. Wilfork, Pete Wilfork's dad, goes to everything. Remember Pete Wilfork? He was the guest speaker at one of our graduations. He's an MLB kid. One of Jason. Yeah, it's one of Jason's.
He comes to all the softball games.
Yeah, he comes to all the soccer games and basketball games too.
Oh, that's nice.
He's Jason's #1 fan. Like he really is.
Nate, do you see a promote to panelist option up there?
He's not really.
Accepted?
You should hear him at the games.
I know, but he's not.
All right, let's see if it works. Sorry, guys?
Anytime I touch technology.
It's never.
All right.
I like that.
There we go.
I'm sure this feels great.
Great way to
We're
start.
watching the clock for a half an hour.
That's fine.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Why don't take off the cat emoji off of Jason too, right?
Try it now, Nate.
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you. All right. The school committee meeting of Thursday, October 24th at Swampscott High School has begun. If you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome. Nice to see a lot of people here and online. My name is Glenn Pastor. I am the chair of the current chair of the Swampscott School Committee, and we are here to meet and interview Mr. Jason Kalishman for the position of Superintendent of Schools. Before I begin, a couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, I do want to, although most everybody knows, everyone here, just for those watching on television or in the audience who have not been here, just want to formally introduce everybody. To my far left is Karen Marshall. Next to Karen is John Jantis. On my far right is Suzanne Wright. And closest to me is Amy O'Connor. The thing I will tell you is we have 46 years of experience serving on this school committee, and I think that's going to be very helpful tonight. I will remind everyone who is in attendance, please shut your phone off. Even if it does vibrate, it definitely picks up on the microphones. We'd appreciate it. A couple more just to let everybody know how this is going to go. The interview should last anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes or so. If it needs longer, we will certainly do that. We're going to alternate asking questions. I'll make an opening statement. Amy will ask first, followed by Karen, Suzanne, and John. Our student reps are on their way, for what I understand. They will also ask questions. I'll introduce them at the time. We will have, after the interview, I should say, we will have a 5-minute recess just to let everybody take a deep breath. We're going to come back and we will have public comment. Okay? We'll talk a little bit more about that. So with that, for the love of learning, community comments, reports and discussions, superintendent's report, we're going to table all of those for this evening. we're going to go right into school committee chair and the interview. Mr. Kalishman, on behalf of everyone sitting out here in front of you, thank you very much for first and foremost raising your hand, and then for coming to this interview. We're excited to learn more about you, more about your thoughts about the district. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Jason Kalishman.
Hi, thanks everybody for having me. So my name is Jason Kalishman. I'm the principal of Swampscott Middle School. I have worked in the district for 13 years, 4 years as the assistant principal of the middle school, and the last 9 as principal. I grew up in Swampscott. I live in Swampscott. I am a Swampscott High School graduate. And I want tonight to be about you learning that I'm far more than just that. While I'm really proud of all of those things, I think you'll see that there's a lot more to me than just that, and ultimately prove to you that I'm the best candidate for this position.
Great. Excellent. I know that you brought some materials for us. You want to talk a little bit about that?
This is just a look through. I have my resume. I wasn't sure of the format at first, so there's a slideshow that you could peek through. Just my most recent evaluation, some letters from families over the years, and some important correspondence, including our latest needs assessment survey results.
Okay, great. So with that, why don't we start the formal process?
Okay.
And we'll start with Ms. O'Connor.
All right. Well, you've done the littlest part by just introducing yourself, but why don't you jump in and talk to us about why you see yourself as the right person to be the next superintendent for Swampscott?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I probably went from never thinking I would be a teacher to certainly never thinking I would be an assistant principal. At some point during an assistant principal, I started to figure out I could be a principal. And then over the past few years, I really started to think about having a little bit more say, and I feel like I've had a really important impact on the middle school over the past 13 years, and I'd like to see how I could improve the wider lens of the elementary and the high school as well. So, yeah, it was definitely a change in mindset as far as the whole career in the first place, but I've been doing it for 23 years, and there's no place I'd rather be and nothing else I'd rather do.
Great, thank you very much. Karen.
What do you see as the most important skills for a superintendent?
I think the most important skills are to be an excellent communicator, to be a strong collaborator, because I don't think anybody can do any of it alone. I mean, I talk to the students all the time about how they might not like it and might not realize that they are a team, and this is certainly a team game here. And you need to be a creative problem solver, all things that I feel like.
Can I just ask a follow-up with that?
Sure.
Of all those skills that you mentioned, what would you say are your strengths and weaknesses?
I think collaboration and building culture is a strong skill of mine. I think the middle school culture speaks for itself, not only for students and staff, families. In my job, you have to be a creative problem solver because it's not black and white, and you're dealing with kids, and you have to sort of navigate in the gray. So it's a collaboration, culture, and being a creative problem solver are my biggest strengths.
All right, great, thank you. Suzanne?
I want to just follow up with this question as well. We sent out a survey not too long ago to people, and the greatest area or the greatest skill that the community who responded wanted was communication. So it's really great that you're saying, being a communicator and listening and collaborating. I just want to share the other areas with you. The importance of working with the community. There's certain characteristics of strong and inspiring and a role model. Supportive to the teachers, having high standards, financial and budget experiences, and prior experiences as a superintendent or teacher were all really important to the community. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you're speaking to some of those things. What would you say, just broadly speaking, are some of the biggest hurdles in education? Like, could be here and broadly speaking.
Yeah, I think education's changed a lot. I mean, forget about 23 years ago when I started, but even the past 5 years. I think that being, in a lot of ways for the better, in some ways for the worse, but for the better, I think the focus on social emotional learning and the well-being of our students' mental health, I don't know if we thought about that 10, 15 years ago, to be honest with you. And now it's at the forefront of everything that we do. Being mindful of what we pick for curriculum and making sure that everybody has access points, that we have an inclusive environment for not only the work that we do, but the building itself. So I think that, the phones are definitely a hurdle. As you know from the high school, it's, earlier and earlier, those things are becoming things that happen on the weekend or at night via phone, end up leaking into school. So it's one of those things that Sato and I deal with a lot. I would say, if we didn't have to deal with things with the phones, we would have a lot more time on our hands. So those are some of the ways that it's changed.
I was going to ask a follow-up to that, and this is really about the phones. I mean, we have had a lot of discussions here about cell phones in school, and all you have to do is read, and there are more and more districts, not only in Massachusetts, but around the country, that are just doing an all-out ban.
Yeah.
What is your thought about that?
I would love to see Swampscott become a district that signs the pledge, the wait till 8th grade pledge. And I don't know if anybody had their kids in middle school years ago. I used to send this stuff out, and people weren't ready for it. But I think now that we see the data and the research on what phones are doing to our kids, just the anxiety provoking, the body image issues, the cons far outweigh the pros. And so I would love to see the ban just for the parents to come together and say, well, I'll wait till 8th grade, would be fantastic. I don't know if we need to ban them from walking into the building. I think that there's ways, at the middle school, they have them often in their backpacks. If they're caught with them sneaking the back, which I'm sure some get away with, we can't be everywhere, but they get a detention, they have a consequence, and then we start back over again. So, I think that it's a challenge, but we definitely need to see the kids not having their phones with them at night, not going to bed with their phones, staring at TikTok, because if we're going to say during the day that mental health is a top priority, then we need some help at night as well with that one.
Great. Thank you. John?
Thanks. Jason, coming back to communication, and just given how important communication is for the superintendent role, I'm just wondering what methods you'll think of using or will use to engage faculty, students, staff, and community.
Yeah. So, do you see my weekly scoop? Do you check the scoop? So every Monday we send a scoop, sort of like a memo from the middle schools, important dates, reminders, anything else that we have coming up. I know that's just one school, but I would envision sort of having something similar to that. That, I don't know if it would be weekly, because, you don't want to inundate parents either. I have kids in 2 different schools here, and, between what we send out at the middle school and the elementary school, I don't want to have parents overload, but I think if there's important communication to be had with the teachers, with community members, the kids, I think we could figure out something where there's some sort of scoop coming from me. Yeah.
Can I ask how are you going to reach community members beyond the school community?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I pride myself in is I try to be everywhere. I am not just sporting events, I'm at the plays, I'm at the concerts. I am trying to be, I try to be visible, and I think that lends itself to meeting people that don't necessarily have to do with the school, they just might be in an event. And I would certainly want to reach out to folks that have any concerns about the school district, because I think one of the worst things that you can have out there is misinformation. He said this, or she said that, or this is what's going on in the schools, and they don't know. And I think that's something that's always been frustrating for me over the years. So I would love and welcome, whether it's a difficult conversation or not, sometimes just like making sure that the community members are on the same page as we are, and making sure that they have access to me. So beyond just being everywhere, I think we'd have to work with town hall to let people know that, beyond just this, because I do think it's tough to reach the people beyond the school district. But I'm sure we could work together to figure something out.
Would you be open to holding community meetings?
Of course. I mean, we did 4 curriculum nights a couple weeks ago, like same thing, I'm happy to do those. I love those.
Well, but not necessarily for the parents,
No,
but, for
Exactly.
town meeting.
No, I hear you. Like, I have no problem doing that. That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
John Nessa?
I'm good for now.
Great. My question is really going to focus on just the current team in place.
Yes.
We have been very lucky the last 10+ years to have a superintendent who also started as an educator in the community, has grown into what I would consider an amazing superintendent, and we were very lucky to have. So you're going in with a strong team. Can you talk a little bit about the current administrative team and where you see just the executive team of this district going forward?
I mean, I think to your point, we're tremendously lucky to have Pam, some of the hires that she's made. And because of the positions that are in place all throughout the district, I mean, we are positioned to go from really good to next level to amazing in a lot of different areas. I'm not just talking about athletics, academics, athletics, the arts, social emotional check-ins with kids, MTSS systems. I mean, there's things that we can do because of the leadership in place that works hopefully collaboratively with the teachers, because they're where the rubber meets the road, and the most important, if we're going to be successful, we need quality teachers. But leadership-wise, I can't remember a time where we've ever been in a position with such strength in the leadership category.
Great.
Can you think of a place where it could use improvement? The leadership team?
Well,
Or is there anything in particular that you find or would find useful as a superintendent?
I think that, we could all do a better job probably with, I think I talked about this before, the family partnerships and getting everybody on board, having families realize that we need them just as much as they need us, and we have to all be on the same team. I think I spoke about how, admittedly, I shied away from that for years, and then Ms. Otto showed me the light, with the parent coffees, and like I said before, we had 4 curriculum nights this year. We want people to come in. We want them to share their concerns. We want to be part of the solution and help them, because we have to all be in this together. I mean, somewhere along the lines, we went from, in education, from teacher and the parents on the same page against the kid, and now it's a little bit skewed. So everybody needs to realize that all the teachers are here for the betterment of the community, betterment of the kids. They want their kids to be loved and respected and learn in their classroom. And let's believe half of what you hear when you go home. Yeah. And we'll figure out work out the details and work together before people jump to the conclusion that, we made a massive mistake. And if we do make a mistake, we have to own it and fix it. So I think that family partnerships across all levels, we probably all need to improve on.
Great, thank you.
Are there certain skills in your leadership team that you're already thinking about capitalizing on?
Certainly.
I mean,
Ms. Raymond's right here. I would say that, I'd have to lean on her, and we've worked really well together for 13 years. And I think one of the things I respected about Pam is that, she always says that, she doesn't want people just to say yes and agree with her. And I've always, I remember when I was assistant principal at those leadership meetings and kind of be like, can I say something or not? But over the course of the years, you kind of find your voice and be able to disagree without being disagreeable, and to sort of share ideas and throw them up on the board and see the pros and cons. And if you can't collaborate and communicate like that and be scared to disagree, you can't be scared to disagree, or else you're not going to improve the district and get us going. So,
are you going to feel any pressures or hurdles transitioning from a member of the team to sort of leading the team, and how like the dynamics and what your leadership style there is going to be?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I don't see it that way. I don't think that there's going to be any issues. I'm very, comfortable in my opinions and how we collaborate, and how, I wouldn't be a top-down person. I would want to hear feedback if I mess something up. As far as just sort of being, principals with people and on the same page and at the same level, I think that I've probably the last 5 or 6 years really had Pam's ear, and she leaned on me on some things, and I leaned on her on some things. So I feel like my leadership has grown within the leadership team. So I wouldn't think anybody in the room would think it was a stretch if I sort of had a bigger vision,
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. Amy.
I lost my place. You've been outspoken about your dislike of high-stakes testing, like MCAS. Can you talk about then how do we measure success? And does this mean that you put less emphasis on data and more on just what you see and experience?
So, thank you for asking that. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. I understand high-stakes testing. I understand the MCAS. If, just for those of you who don't know, our 8th grade just finished 22 percentage points above the state average for meets and exceeds in English, 21% over meets and exceeds in math, 14 in STE. I mean, we value it. What always bothered me was the over-testing. So, for example, before we had Chromebooks, before we had the network to cover the test, it took 22 days at the middle school to test 5 through 8. That's what my frustration was. And I think that would be everybody's frustration. I mean, think about time on learning. We're testing for 22 days. So we have that down to 7 now. So I think, we all need to have measuring sticks and see where we are. I mean, I am all for formative assessments. We use the iReady data to see where kids are growing and where they are at. We use the MCAS. My other issue with the MCAS, to be honest with you, really has to do with some of our special needs students as a requirement for graduation that I thought was unfair, frankly. And so it came from a place of sort of wanting to protect my students and give them let them still learn a high school diploma, So I value the teacher grades. They're the experts. I value the iReady, formative assessments along the way. And yeah, we look at MCAS, but it's one data point. So that's where I think it was always one data point to me, not this massive, it's in way more than anything else, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I will say personally, for my own children, I value their report card far more than I value their MCAS score. That doesn't mean I don't want them to strive to do well, and we'll do what we have to do to get them where they need to be, but, I mean, that's always been our top priority.
So as a follow-up to that, if it's not inappropriate, what's your stance on the MCAS requirement that's on the ballot?
I'm a yes.
You guys, can I follow up with this, Joe?
Absolutely.
I'm thinking, I had a conversation earlier today with Amy, and we were talking about rankings and ratings for different districts, and talking about how people get concerned that our ranking seems to be dropping instead of going up, and we're looking at the problems in Marblehead right now, and their ranking is still above ours, and it seems crazy. So just given like the discussions about this, what are the metrics? What are some metrics that you think that we should be focusing on that show that this district is successful?
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at those metrics, number of kids in AP classes, who's taking the AP exam. I mean, we want to have more kids taking AP classes, and that might hurt us ultimately. Kind of like when I talked about algebra. We have more kids taking algebra than ever before in 8th grade. Does that hurt our MCAS? It absolutely does, because they don't teach 1 second of anything on the MCAS, and that's our top percentage of students. And they're not getting one reminder, not one review of anything MCAS related that whole year. It was still 21 points above the state. So I think that, the metrics we have to use are our kids. I mean, it's several different things. One, it's our kids happy. Are they in school? Are they successful with their iReady? How do their report cards look? And are they growing with MCAS? All of that. I think that the rankings drive me crazy too. And I think we have to take a really close look at what do they want, and then let's make adjustments, because there is no reason why we shouldn't be a top 50 or top 25 or whatever it is. Now, mind you, I always get aggravated because these people who are ranking have never been into the school. I'd love for you to walk around the middle school and tell me where that's ranked, because I would argue it's the best middle school around, not just because I work there. I truly believe it is. But if that's the game we have to play, then I think we have to look at what they're asking and then sort of make adjustments so that we are on the rise. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Karen?
Switching gears a little bit, have you faced a time when your student's need has been in conflict with a teacher need, and how would you handle that?
Student need, I mean, I think that happens a lot. Yeah, it depends on the situation. It really, you have to get all the information at hand. And listen, not every student has the same background and coming to the table with the same situation as the person next to them. So it really does depend. I mean, fair does not always mean equal. And so, why didn't you get detention, but you did? And why did this happen, but she didn't? It's not necessarily always the same thing, because you have to remember where kids are coming from as well. Now, I pride myself on trying to support the teachers as much as I can. And I think if you, to a person, and it doesn't mean we agree on every single issue, because we certainly haven't over the past 13 years. But I think to a person, if you ask the teachers at the middle school, do I have their backs? I would say, they'd say yes, but I also have the kids' backs too.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you find you can somehow come to a resolution that works for everybody?
98% of the time, yes. I mean, and certainly when those times, when we can't come to a resolution, it's ultimately my call.
Okay.
So,
Great, thank you. Suzanne?
I was just thinking, some criticism of you being a superintendent is sort of, I've heard that, you live in this town, you have kids in this town, you have friends in this town, your kids have friends in this town, and how are you gonna balance, getting to 95% without favoritism or without sort of, I'm thinking, student and teacher things, and also your ability to evaluate, your friends and your friends who also are your colleagues.
yeah. So I would say that, as I feel like it's important to mention that I haven't lived here my whole life, and yes, I have strong connections in town, which I think is a real benefit. I also taught in the inner city in Jersey City for 2 years. I came back and worked in Wakefield. I worked for the ABC program in Topsfield. I coached at Masco. After gaining all these experiences, I chose to come back here and raise my family here because I do love this town. I think that, part of my job for the last 13 years has always been, I have to do its best. It's like a business. I mean, you can't mix friendships and business. I mean, I would always do what's best for the school, for the kids, for the teachers. That's my job. And sometimes do I get it wrong? Absolutely. And when I get it wrong, I try to fix it. But, I try to treat everybody as fairly as I can and look at the issue. And there have been disagreements with people that I'm friends with. I've had, friends that are union reps that, will disagree on situations. But always respectfully, and I would never be compromised by somebody else's opinion. I think if I ran the school that way, it wouldn't be as successful as it is. Quite frankly, when I said earlier that I realized pretty quickly I could be principal, I mean, I think some of those things were, let me get involved in the hiring process and let me make sure that it's not just somebody from down the street. So I get when people say that, but I'm more than just a resident. I think if you looked at my resume, and if this was a national search and you looked for my resume, I think you'd be pretty interested in having me come in for an interview based on what's on there. So.
Great, thank you. John?
So Jason, I think we can all agree that the role of superintendent will come with many challenges. And I guess just to help us, kind of understand your thought process, can you talk about a challenge that you have faced in a professional role that what you felt was significant and how you actually addressed that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's certainly staffing challenges, which have, we used to have 120, 100 applicants for a job, and now we have 2, so that you have to be really creative, and you can't just sit back and wait for the phone to ring. You have to go recruit people. I think the student challenges, the students have changed. Like I said, we have to be really mindful of how the students feel walking into the building, if they're ready to learn. You can't learn any material if you're, anxious or depressed. We need to be mindful of representation. If you walk around the middle school, we try to, what's on our walls matters. The music we listen to in the morning matters. Like all these things, how we talk to the kids matters. And so I think the shift in education over the past 5 or 7 years has been a good thing because we are completely entrenched in worrying about the whole student and teaching the whole student. So back to the metrics, Suzanne, from what you were saying before about the metrics used to be a successful school. I mean, that's not measured. And I think that's incredibly important that, well, maybe it is measured. I mean, you look at the chronic absenteeism rate in the state, it's over 20%. At the middle school, our chronic absenteeism rate, if you take out excused absence, is 7.32%. So what's that tell you? Kids want to come here. So somehow, despite all of the challenges, COVID and learning loss and the phones and not being able to find people to fill positions, even though we've been lucky, we've been able to retain staff, and our kids want to be here every single day. So now we have to do that at every single building, that we have staff that loves it here, that they want to be here, that they feel like we have their back, they're treated as professionals. We're treating the kids the right way. How would we want somebody treating our own children? And that gets them there. And that's 7.32% in middle school. I don't know if you remember middle school, but I'm sure, you know, I don't know if you wanted to be there that much, but I think it's a testament to the teachers in the building, and I think we can certainly figure out a way to do that for the entire district.
So that, I'm going to follow up with that if you don't mind. You know, the statistics at the middle school were actually incredible. We definitely have a absentee issue at the high school, and we're not alone. Many communities are far more challenged than us.
Yeah.
How do you see a high school with older students connecting with those students, and especially the families? I mean, it's families in this community.
Yeah.
How would you start working on that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what part of our new, and I love this, the MTSS system for attendance is we're meeting monthly. And anybody that gets on our radar, we start calling right away. It's me, Emily, guidance. We want to be on it. We don't want anybody, I want to improve on the 7.32%. The high school would have to do the same thing. I think, you know, I know the high school schedule is a hot button topic, but I think that's something that might be a hindrance to kids being in school as much as they should. If they think they have until 11 off, then, oh, I might as well just stay home. I don't know all the details. I'd have to look at that, but I know that that's the perception out there, and sometimes perception is reality. So I want to make sure that the high school kids are in school, and it takes, you know, all of the boots on the ground. I mean, people need to be calling. We have to be going to houses if need be, making phone calls. But most importantly, if you set the culture where kids want to be there every day, again, and feel respected and feel valued and have something that they're interested in. Listen, we have Taylor Swift Club at the middle school. Like, whatever it takes to get you out of bed in the morning, if that's what it takes, you know, let's have it. And we have to have strong music and arts. We have to have, if it's athletics, if it's an after-school club, if it's your math teacher or your robotics teacher, those are all classes and things that we want to have as many things that if that's what gets kids up and excited about school and getting them there, we need to offer them.
Great, thank you. So my next question is actually going to cover special education. Those who know me, it's near and dear to my heart. I absolutely agree with you. MCAS and special education does not work.
Yeah.
Having lived that part. Genetically, I should say, special education students are on the rise, both in Swampscott and elsewhere.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that, and how do you see, I don't say better outcomes, because I think we do an amazing job here.
Yeah.
How do we get more better? How do we get more better outcomes for our students?
Yeah. So I would say a few things, and as much as you know how much I love the middle school when I talk about one area of weakness for us is right now we need to get our special ed numbers down below 20%, I would say. And to do that, we have to look at our schedule. And we have to have built-in systems of support, that MTSS systems, to give kids what they need. We're already looking at a tweak for next year. We're not going to have a massive overhaul of the schedule, but we're talking about little tweaks here and there that can give kids what they need so they have the access to the curriculum that's going to help them, and constantly measuring that data. So we're looking at, again, at iReady, we're looking to get an MCAS, we're looking at those formative assessments the teachers are given in the classroom, and using that data, and then making an informed decision, having targeted groups where kids can really have an impact, where the teaching can have an impact and kids can make improvements.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, can I ask a follow-up on that?
Of course.
So you raise a really good point with that, Jason. I guess you said you wanted to look at the data. Is part of what you look at just feedback from the faculty, just what they're seeing in their classrooms, and, you know, would you be open to listening to, you know, what that feedback would be, and also just use that with the data?
So twice a year, we send out, there's like a DESE principal survey that you send to the staff. It's like the worst time. It's like, you know, Thanksgiving when everybody's ready to, you know, go crazy, and then in the spring. But you have to send out to the staff. They give you honest feedback. It's anonymous about what's going well, what's not going well. So I'm always open to feedback. I'd love when feedback's face-to-face, so we'll, you know, sometimes an email or in surveys like that. You really don't understand the feel of it and the root behind it. But if people aren't comfortable with face-to-face, I'm totally okay with surveys being sent out, and feedback is important, positive and negative, I think. Yeah.
Great. Before I continue, I just want everybody to introduce Sam. Sam is one of our student representatives. Sam, thanks for, I know you had a school
Sorry,
commitment.
late, yep.
No, thanks for coming, we appreciate it.
Hey, Sam.
Amy?
How you doing?
Sorry, we're jumping around, so. I'll leave this one. Actually, I'll toss this one over to you, number 14.
All right. Thank you. In lots of communities, or in quite a few communities lately, including what's happening in Marblehead and Melrose, parents are raising concerns about how the METCO program is working in its entirety, actually, and and other civil rights issues with other minority students, with METCO students and other minority students, how they're being treated relative to their white peers.
Yeah.
I was just sort of wondering what our issues are here and how you can affect that.
Yeah. So that's a very important issue. I would think that not just METCO students, but all of our students of color in marginalized groups, we need to be mindful of. The METCO students, obviously, it's a long day. It's really hard to get up, get on the bus, get to Swampscott, and perform and make friends, and then have to get back on the bus and do the same thing over again the next day. I started my career, I chose to teach in the inner city. Then, like I said before, I was the resident director of A Better Chance. I don't know if you know that, but it was a program where students from the Bronx and Harlem went to Topsfield. I lived with them. My wife and I lived with them. I went to parent conferences. I coached some of the kids in baseball. We helped with homework. I met their girlfriends. Talk about navigating like teenagers before I was ready to navigate. I'm still not ready to navigate teenagers, but and those are the things we were doing. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me, as far as just equity and representation, and like I said before, some of the things we pride ourselves on in the middle school is just what's on our walls, how do we treat people, what books are we reading. We started a few years ago, we started a book club where once a week, I think actually Superintendent Angelakis joined the book club, where 2 8th grade teachers read books about marginalized groups, and we had diverse authors, so we're not just reading that old dead white guys, as everybody says. We were actually on the cutting edge of that. I know that's become sort of like the theme throughout the district, but the middle school has been doing that for a long time. And I think it comes down to, again, about everybody feeling valued and respected. Now, I do think the distance sometimes can be the crux of the issue. So if you have a student of color that their families from Swampscott, they see us in the community, they see me at drop-off every single day. Sometimes just not seeing that face-to-face, that's another reason why being visible is so important, that you don't get the whole picture. And we want everybody, so we have to do a better job getting ourselves out there to the METCO community, making sure that they see us, see who we are, and mistakes are going to happen, certainly, as with all of our kids, but knowing that we need to gain trust back, that their kids are in the right place, that they are valued, they are respected, and hopefully that they're here for a long time and can bring a lot to our community, and hopefully we can share things with them.
So if there's a parent who's saying to you, my kid doesn't feel like they belong here, they've been here for 7 years and they still don't feel part of this community, or they still feel like different, how do you rectify that, or how do you help that parent or help that child? 7 years is a long time to be here and still not feel part of a community, but I know there are high school students that are experiencing some of those feelings.
Yeah, I think, sadly, there's probably students from Swampscott that feel that way. I think that there's kids that don't make connections with teachers or coaches or their peers, and we always have to be mindful of that and trying to, make connections with those kids. We always, find the kid that, that looks like they're not happy or that they're sad. I would say over the course of my career, I've had hundreds of METCO families through the district, and I'm sure that I would venture to say the vast majority of them feel pretty good about their experience. Just like thousands of Swampscott students, that the vast majority of them feel pretty good, but, can we do a better job with a small percentage? I think so, but I think we're constantly looking to make kids and families feel connected. I've come along, like I said, I've come along recently about the family part of it. I always felt that the kids needed to be connected to school. But I think the family engagement piece will be important too.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that?
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't want to speak for everyone up here, but I think we'd all agree that we'd like to expand the METCO program. One reason, we certainly have the room. Two, I think it offers all of the students a unique perspective on what their surroundings are when they get to the real world, not just here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about trying to add all levels of students from elementary, this big new
Yeah.
elementary school we have, which definitely has the room, all the way up?
I think, like anything, the younger the kids get here, the better. I wish Nahant came here sooner.
Yeah.
I think it's also, important to, I think that the earlier we get the kids, the more they'll be ingrained into the culture. Like, Suzanne said that the kid's been here 7 years and doesn't feel comfortable. That's a mistake. We have to fix that. But if you're here from kindergarten or first grade, second grade, straight through, my guess is that a lot of those kids feel connected here. And when they don't, we have to recognize that with counselors and teachers and coaches and see what we can do, and admin, and see what we can do to make sure that they feel connected.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Do you have a question?
I'm going to jump ahead, actually. So something kind of similar. So a superintendent, when problems don't get resolved, they escalate to the highest office.
Yep.
And often these problems involve our most vulnerable students and their families. I know Martha and I have spoken about this. They often feel like outsiders and unheard. Can you discuss a time when you didn't handle something as well as you would have liked, and what you would do differently now?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is how I handled the start of the GSA at the middle school. So the late, great Sandy Maltz.
The GSA is,
The Gates Alliance, yeah.
for everybody else.
So when
Thanks.
when Sandy came to me, 8 or 9 years ago, whatever it was, I thought we weren't ready. I thought the kids were too young, and she just kept on coming at me, and finally I said, yes, let's do it. I was waiting for backlash that never came, and now it's such a thriving program at our school, open mic nights. Kids, another place where kids can go to feel connected to other kids is what we want. So when I look back on it, I was like, oh my God, I should have done that year one. Because anything that we can build into our school where kids want to come every single day is the ultimate goal. And I was late with that one,
Yeah.
and she was right. So,
I'm going to push you a little bit.
okay.
Can you think of times when it didn't go, where you would change how you dealt with a particular family or a particular student that you maybe would re-script if you could?
I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I'll answer this, and then if it's not, press me again, okay? So I think, and this isn't about our most vulnerable group, certainly, when I say the sentence, but I think of algebra.
What?
Algebra. So 8th grade algebra, there's a criteria. You get a 93 average, you have, exceeding on MCAS, you have the teacher recommendation, you have the I-ready, and kids would miss, and families would come in, and I'd say, sorry, you didn't make the team. And I would say that to them. And then finally, we started having discussions, because I thought that was sort of like being strong and supporting the teachers, because what I didn't want, and what I thought was going to happen, is that the kid that didn't earn getting in ended up complaining that the teacher's bad, and that, it's all the teacher's fault that I have a C or a D. So that's where it came from. But I didn't let families in. And then it dawned on me at some point, like, all right, we're a public school, and we want kids to be challenged, and we want families who care. That's part of what's great about being in Swampscott. We have, the families are engaged, and they have opinions. So we started allowing the overrides. You have to do the summer packet, okay? As much as I hate packets, I do think it is valuable for the override students. And now, like last year, we had 75 kids taking algebra. And some of the kids that were overrides were A students, and some of them rose to the challenge. So again, when I look back on it, sort of thinking that there were certainly kids that probably could have gained a lot from that experience, and and benefited, and families could have benefited. Do I wish I could do that over again? Of course, because I think we should have allowed overrides from the jump. Yeah.
Karen?
I think that's a really good insight. I like that one. So let's talk budget.
Okay.
So the budgeting process is one of our greatest hurdles at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
How would you prioritize funding to align with district goals?
Yeah. I know this is easier said than done, but I mean, we cannot afford to lose teachers. We cannot, we are not this like, we don't have all the bells and whistles. I think my top priority would be teacher retention. I mean, if you lose somebody, you're not getting somebody back. And anytime anybody leaves at this point, to be honest with you, I used to talk about change. When people used to leave, I would be like, oh, they're dead to me. And now I don't blame anybody. You know, if people, it's a really hard job with incredible expectations that are almost impossible to fulfill. So if we have all-star people, I don't want to lose them. So the budget has to keep that in mind, that we cannot lose teachers. And yes, do we have to build programs for the kids? Yeah, but I would say our top priority would be making sure that our teachers aren't cut.
Absolutely.
So how do you balance that at the same time that we also recognize that we need social services? That, you know, we were just talking a few minutes ago about, you know, having
Yeah.
therapy and, you know,
Yeah.
those people that are dedicated to the multi-systems of support.
Yeah.
So how would you balance it? And here's the thing, I know that as I ask this question, there's nobody
no answer.
who has this answer.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a challenge to, and you see this in towns all over the Commonwealth, that, you know, how do you pay teachers what they deserve and keep these systems in place and have the mental health staff in place, and then not fire everybody 2 years later when you can't afford them, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really what the challenge is. And that comes with creative thinking and creative problem solving. That's something that our leadership team would have to tackle, because I do think it's a priority that it's, you know, we're not operating under this. We have all these things that are extra. So it's really tough to like trim the fat. There's not a whole lot of fat here. But I think it's advocating for more money from the town, making sure that the community knows about this, and making sure that we don't make the grave mistake of eliminating teachers. And by teachers, I mean staff. I mean, like, counselors as well. Anybody that's directly impacting kids, we can't lose. Yeah.
I want to follow up with that too, and you talked about advocacy, and we are facing, and we're not alone, facing a school budget challenge.
Yeah.
The town also has other challenges. They have other contracts. They have fire, they have police, they have DPW, and then they have probably their largest expense, which is the school district. And I agree with you, there's not a whole lot, if any, fat left to go. At the same time, you as the leader need to guide and help the school committee to fight for literally every dollar.
Yeah.
And sometimes fight to when a room full of people disagree with you. What's your thought about making presentations in front of town meeting, making presentations to us? And more importantly, we are very lucky right now to have an amazing business manager.
Yeah.
How would you go about working with all of us to get the budget that our students need and deserve?
Yeah. I work closely with Ms. Stella right now. She is incredible, and she's such an amazing resource for the district. I'm completely comfortable talking in front of town meeting or at, you know, community forums, or presenting at town hall, to making sure that people understand the connection between their property value and schools that are great. And just because we have, and of course we have this brand new beautiful school, that doesn't mean we're all set. And I think I hope that's not what people think, that, oh, well, they just got the brand new $100 million school, and now we can just, you know, not worry about the schools for a couple of years. As somebody who lives in the middle school,
Right.
you know, I know about the challenging issues with, that we're facing there. And, you know, it can't stop. If we want this to be the town that we all want it to be for our kids to grow up in and have the educational system that we all moved here for, then we're gonna have to fight for the money and work collaboratively with the town. I'll frame it this way. I don't want to fight before I don't have the job or don't even know who's over it. But I would like to work collaboratively with the town
Right.
to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I know we're probably not going to get everything we ask for, but, you know, why not ask for everything that we do need?
Great, perfect.
So,
Suzanne?
so,
Okay.
So as the leader of the school district, do you have some ideas about relationship building with the leader of the town side and the chair people of the boards?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to get the job, I think that would be one of my first.
So like, and you would do it how?
I'd want to meet with them. I'd call and say, I think we should meet. I'd want to introduce myself, talk about my values. I think another thing, a little outside the box, is I would love to establish another SEF, because I think that those are valuable. And
I mean, just for everyone.
oh, sorry, Swampscott Educational Foundation, meaning that if you have Swampscott Educational Fundraising Foundation that's fundraising for funds, that if we could fundraise privately, give a number or whatever, $100,000, it's $100,000 that we're not spending on something else for the budget, for the operating budget. So I do think we have to show the town that we're willing to think outside the box, to make connections outside of the town government, and I think that will help too. Like, look, we're not just coming to you for the money. We're going to a lot of different places for this money, and hopefully that will help build a relationship and show that we're willing to go above and beyond to get what the kids need.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Can you talk about teacher evaluation and how you would continue or update our evaluation program and talk about staff accountability
Sure.
and your ideas and what you
Yeah.
think we need?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably, people have probably said this one. I am definitely a stickler with the evaluation system for our non-PTS teachers. I mean, I think it's really hard to get PTS at the middle school. I think
But you're non-what? You're non?
non-PTS, so you're non-professional status teachers. So
But how about, yeah, okay.
I'm just starting. Yeah.
Alright.
So and because I would say the evaluation system, for the way it's set up, I pride myself, I try to be in the classrooms every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. So I know what's happening in the classrooms. That doesn't mean it's always evaluative, and I have to be mindful of that. But I always put our focus on the non-professional status teachers, because that's where you have a little bit more say, to be honest with you, a little bit more wiggle room. So for the professional status teachers, and for, we have to have, what do we think is important? Like, what do we want to see, and make it really clear. Also, with the evaluation system, sometimes it's like, show two-way communications with families. It's like, oh, here's an email from a parent. It's like, check the box. So I will say that sometimes we have teachers who are outstanding teachers, outstanding educators, that our kids are lucky to have, and we're lucky to have them. And that is the case in middle school, I will say, and across the district. But you might not be great at the uploading of the proof. Vice versa, you might have somebody that's struggling that's great at uploading the evidence. So I think we really need to make sure that's practical, that it's meaningful, and it's not just sort of like a, it's not just something people can throw together, and if you're great at uploading info, that it looks like you're this great teacher. Because on paper, things look one way, but when you're in the classroom every day and you see what's happening, you know the truth. So I'm, very confident in how I feel about the teachers in my building. I know strengths, and we discuss weaknesses and work on them together. And that's never, having those conversations has never been difficult for me. I think that's the only way to grow as a school. And vice versa, I always welcome people into my office. If I've made a mistake, I want them to tell me.
Okay, but as a superintendent, you're here and you have three building principals, right?
Yeah.
So how are you managing? How are you? You're not going. You can go into classrooms, and you probably still will go into
Yes.
classrooms, but you won't be doing it as you're
Right.
doing it now. And so
Right.
you need to manage an elementary school, a middle
Yeah.
school, and a high school. And I would argue that your experience seems to be in the middle school primarily, right?
Yes.
And the high school is a different beast, and there's definitely issues that need to be tackled. And so I'm just sort of like, how are you getting your administrators to evaluate as
Yeah. Well, in some ways, as far as, you're right. I know the middle school like the back of my hand, and that's just the facts of it. That's what it is. But, Sanborn worked with me for 6 years. And so I think we talk about the same things and the same values of what we're looking for an evaluation. We lean on each other with certain things. Ms. Otto, I'm working with every single day. obviously at the high school, I'm not here as much. So I would have to get in there and see what are the issues. But I do think that if I'm in charge of the leadership team and I'm in charge of the principals, we have to get on the same page of what are we looking for, what are we expecting, and what are we going to do when we're not seeing it? And therein lies the rub. I mean, that's what has to happen. So.
Okay. Before I move on, Sam, do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, it was touched upon earlier. Obviously, teacher retention is something that's very important to me.
Yeah.
And, many students at the high school, and I bet parents at all levels, seeing as how many people are here now. Obviously, it's bargaining season for the teachers this year. I kind of just wanted you to, touch a little bit more on, like, your values as far as, how you plan to approach. I know Ms. O'Connor asked you how you plan to approach balancing that with other aspects of the job, but, can you talk a little bit more about your values as far as, like, teachers and how that's gonna work with throughout the 3 schools?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, teacher retention is vital. And not just teacher retention, outstanding teachers. That's who we need to retain. People that care about the kids and are excellent at their craft. And I would work with the union and the town government, and like I said, trying to establish an SEF to make sure that we have enough funds to make sure that not only are we keeping the teachers, but also building programs and having everything else that we need. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, the Promethean boards don't pay for themselves, and the Chromebooks and all these things. But, we can talk about, technology is important, of course it is. We can talk about, all the things that we need to run a successful school, but it's really hard to do it unless we have the right people in place.
Yeah.
So, I've always valued what teachers bring to the table. And I've always, listen, the middle school has a really good reputation, I would say, and it's not because of me. I mean, if I could have all the ideas in the world and think that, this is great and we should do this and we should try that, if there's no teachers there implementing those plans and being on board and establishing a culture in the building and smart enough to challenge the kids that need to be challenged and get the kids who are struggling up to where they need to be, I mean, the school's not where it should be. So I think that is the most important thing that we can figure out.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know it's not going to be easy to do it, but.
Great.
Can I follow up?
Absolutely.
Sorry. So to that end, it is, as Sam said, we're going into bargaining season. So how comfortable are you joining that process and digging in there? That would probably be new.
Yeah, I'd love to be part of that process.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
look
it
forward
can,
to it.
obviously, you're working with the teachers, and we do it as collaboratively as possible, but it can also get very awkward at times. So do you feel like you're prepared for that?
Yeah, of course. I've never shied away from difficult conversations. I mean, I remember being a teacher and picketing, and I was thinking like, ugh. And then having it happen here, where, the teachers come in, work to rule or whatever, or picketing out front, and it's always uncomfortable. But I think if everybody knows where you're coming from, and that we all want the same thing, for the most part, that you can come to some common ground. Yeah. And I look forward to that process.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, kind of going back to the previous question, Jason. So, I've heard you mention the word culture a number of times.
Yeah.
I've heard culture, collaboration culture.
Sure.
And, as the superintendent, I'm just wondering what attributes that you think would make an effective culture kind of system-wide? I know you've talked about the middle school culture, but just kind of thinking, kind of big picture, what attributes are important to you to establish that culture?
I mean, I think, again, effective communication, effect that creative problem solving, because we're going to have problems. We're going to have to work collaboratively and communicate well. I think the visibility is key. And, the kids and the teachers need to know that you respect them. And, the teachers are professionals. I want to treat them as such. And the kids, we're here for them, and I want them to know that. So it's frustrating. Listen, we do 3 times a year, we do these safety and respect talks at the middle school with the kids. We want to talk to them about everything in between the phones and if we have a shelter in place and all these things and the words we use. Now, does that mean it stops all mean things that are said? No. But we try to get ahead of it as much as possible. I'd love to see that happen in every single school. I'd love to see, because if the kids feel like this is their this is their Harvard, like this is how we're going to get to it. This is their private school, because it is in a lot of ways. Like there's so many opportunities here, and so much, so many great things that happen here, and so many talented people that I want the kids to feel how lucky they are. And I know it's not easy for a 13, 14, or 15-year-old to think, wow, so lucky to be in math right now, right? But long term, the goal is, I want these kids to be creative problem solvers, to be able to collaborate in a workforce, to be well-adjusted and happy and have whatever career they'd like, and then to look back one day and say, wow, I was so, because it's not gonna, it's like delayed gratification, which we're not great at right now, especially with the phones. But I want them to look back and say, wow, I was so lucky to be here. I was so lucky to go to school in Swampscott, K through 12. And that is, sometimes it's delayed, but we have to chip away at that culture piece by piece, grade by grade. I remember when I first started, the preschool's connected to the middle school. And it was my first year at the middle school, and there were kids holding hands and skipping down the hallway to the bathroom, right by the office. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, that doesn't look like the 7th grade, you know? And how do we get, maybe they're not skipping and holding hands, but how do we get them to want to be here? How do we get them to have that sense of love that they want to come to school every day? And that's the challenge. So that's how we have to build the culture with that in mind, with the idea that happy kids and engaged kids and happy staff that want to be here every day, that are talented, is how we're going to build the culture. And kids that feel valued and respected as well. Sorry.
Can you talk about happy staff? Because how do you change the culture to sort of increase morale in a building right now that doesn't have great morale?
That's tricky. Yeah, I think I have to get in to the buildings and see exactly what the issue is. And I think the first priority would be get in, spend as much time in the other 2 buildings as I can. Not to leave the middle school out of it, but I know what's happening there. So I'd have to get in the other 2 buildings and see what the issues are and how we can help to solve them. So it's tough to answer until I get in there, I guess, or if I was lucky enough to get in there, if I got the job, but that's...
So it sounds like you have a process in mind, like a concept of how you would approach, addressing,
Of course.
Suzanne's
Yeah,
question.
you need to get in there. You need to get in the classrooms. You need to talk to the teachers. You have to have meetings with the teachers and make sure that they trust you enough to have open, honest conversations. Again, listen, the middle school wasn't always so, and not that we don't have our moments, we certainly do, but, it was a very complicated building, I think, where we have, not complicated, but we had a lot of people with really strong opinions about things. I mean, moving advisory to the morning instead of the afternoon was like an act of Congress. Starting morning music was not easy. There was, people emailing me really upset about some of these changes. But over time, you show people that you really care, that you have good ideas, that you might not get them all right, but when you do, you try to fix them, and then they want to get on board as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about these changes and the kinds of emails that you got? Were they from teachers? Were they?
Yeah, so when we moved, advisory, for those of you who don't know, so advisory now is in the morning. Okay, when I got there, it was in the afternoon, then it was in the middle, then we rotated it, and actually, I was at lunch duty one day, and an 8th grade student came up to me and she said, Mr. C, in my old school in Connecticut, we used to have advisory in the morning because that way, if kids were late, it didn't really impact learning. And then if we had a test or quiz that day, we could kind of review it. I was like, that is genius. So
Out of the mouth of babes.
So when we started though, everybody thought that we were going to, all the kids would come at 8:55. That didn't happen because they want to be here. So that's when advisory ends. But what it did was, yes, there's still kids who are tardy, but do they still have a consequence for being tardy? Absolutely. But are they missing math instruction? Are they walking into your English class and disrupting everything because they're late? No, which has been great. So that took a little bit, but it was a culture change. It was a schedule change. So I think that... Why was that difficult for teachers? I think change is difficult sometimes, yeah. I mean, like I said, morning music, the first time I played, so the morning music came from, we had some students who were chronically tardy, and I thought, let's see what happens if we play music in the morning, see if it just changes the energy in the building. And people emailed me, who made this decision, why weren't we told about it? And, a small portion of people with it, but I got some emails that people weren't happy. And I was like, if you want to pick the song, you can. It's all right. It's whatever. So, and then we've been doing it ever since. And then, Miss Sanborn stole it at the elementary school, and they all think it's her idea. So,
Right.
It is interesting to hear that would have been controversial.
yeah.
I would think that would be beloved.
Yeah.
John?
Jason, changing gears a little bit, I know you've mentioned, phones in the middle school a couple of times. I think just kind of technology is a larger issue. I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are and how that can, enhance the learning environment district-wide going forward if you got the role.
Well, I think, in some ways it's dangerous as far as enhancing the learning environment. I think it can go both ways. I mean, we had Cliff Notes, I guess, right? And kids now could just go on AI and they could type up a paper pretty quickly, I would imagine. So I think we have to be really smart about figuring out where the kids can benefit, how it can enhance learning, but also having safety measures in place to make sure that we're not just, we have to keep academic integrity in mind. So it's really tricky. I mean, one of the things we decided in the middle school was that we want the vast majority of writing pieces to be done in school. I don't know if that's happening at other schools or not, but it's definitely a challenge, and we need to be certainly, luckily Ms. Mackey-Knowles does an amazing job sending teachers things to look out for and informing our students, but maybe we do need to talk to the students more and engage them in the process a little bit more, because that's not really about phones what you're talking about. You're talking about the work, right? And we need to use the technology and take advantage of the technology, but also be mindful of it's easier to cheat than ever. I mean, we had a big text message rain a few years ago. It's just everybody, there were 50 kids on it. Here's the answer number 1 through 10, and just nobody, but so ultimately we had to talk to the kids once they got caught, was well, who's this benefiting? Yeah, you got your homework done, but you all just failed the test because none of you know what you're doing. So I think it's informing the kids, having honest discussions with them, finding ways that technology can help, but making sure we're being really safe about it and smart about it so the kids are still independent thinkers as well.
I want to follow up with that. I mean, I don't know if you've read, but there's a lawsuit going on right now. A high school student, Holliston, Holbrook, could be incorrect on the town, and this particular student was assigned a large project, and they weren't explicitly told not to use AI.
Mm.
They did use AI, and they were marked as cheating. It was Hingham, by the way.
I saw it, yeah.
And so they were marked as cheating, and this particular student won't be allowed on National Honor Society. There's a lot of ripple-down effects.
Yeah.
What's your thought about AI? And you talked a little bit about it, but can you expand that? And I'm really thinking on a high school level.
Yeah, high school level. I think it has to be part of the handbook and really clear expectations, syllabus, handbook. What are our expectations? How can you use it? I think we need to teach. I mean, I don't think it would be smart to run away from it. I think we have to use it as a tool, but be really clear to the kids so they know in a syllabus, in a handbook, what's okay. And, and I think the reason that, in that story, if I remember correctly, it was because of the numerical F that the kid got.
Correct.
Kept him up.
Correct.
The 60 would have kept him in
Right.
National Honor Society
Correct.
or whatever.
Yeah.
I think in that case, we need to be really reasonable too.
Right.
I mean, we're not, why?
Yeah, he was, I'm sorry, the child was failed.
Right. But it was, I think that I'm all about test corrections. I think you might not get it the first time.
Right. If
we fail or if somebody makes a mistake, I'd like to see what they can do. And I think we give the kid an opportunity. You don't bury the kid over mistakes. Let's let them write their own essay or whatever it was and see if we can grade that one.
Great.
Yeah.
So I want to ask just a little bit about graduation, high school students, going to college, going to work, going to the armed forces. We are a community on a healthy average that many of our students do attend 2 or 4 year college coming out of high school. We are lucky. There are, though, a ever-growing number of students who, after graduation, go to the workforce, go into armed forces, maybe do a different type of schooling. As the leader of the district, you have competing forces. You have people chirping here and say, well, we need to get as close to 100% college, kids going to college as we possible. And you have people who are saying, well, my child is not a college student, but he's a good student. Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy about that.
I think that we have to offer what's best for each kid. And if you want to go to an Ivy League school, you should be able to get that from Swampscott High School, if that's your goal. If you want to go to the military or have be an electrician or a plumber, you should be able to get to that from Swampscott High School. So I think we need to have options, while not lowering any expectations in any sort of area, we need to have options for everybody. And I think that part of our mission should be getting kids prepared for whatever it is they want to do in life. And if it's going to the workforce, I think that's great, if that's their choice. I don't think everybody has to fit in the box and do the same exact thing. That's why success is such an interesting thing to measure. We can talk about MCAS, or we can talk about the rankings of high schools. The way I would measure success is, do we have smart, well-adjusted, successful students who are made, whether it's in their career or in college or in the military, that are have all the tools that they need to be successful, is really what we're looking for.
Great. Amy?
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Can you talk about a difficult relationship that you have professionally? And without, you don't obviously have to say who it is, but what makes it difficult, and how do you respond to this person to get what you need to get done?
I can say this, that sometimes intent and impact, Emily and I talk a lot to the kids about this, but intent and impact are things that we need to be mindful of too. So, for example, I think this is what you're asking, but if it's not what you want, just let me know afterwards. So, from the time I got to the middle school, and I don't even know how it started, it was like, you're the assistant principal, you go to the math department meetings. Always. So that was my thing. I went to the math departments. And then when I became principal, I went to all the math department meetings, not realizing that I was kind of alienating everybody else, because our focus was like, how are we going to get the math scores up? How are we going to get the math scores up? What are we doing with algebra? Should we override? Should, this, that? Should we have pods to start the classes? Do we need exit tickets? Whatever it was. And I think that if I could do it over again, I would have been more transparent with other department heads, because I think they felt slighted. And how come you never come to the other places? So I think when you talk about strained relationships or anything that along those lines, I think I have to be self-reflective and say, all right, how did we get here? What was my role in it? And how do I fix it? Because ultimately, again, I want people to want to stay here and teach, especially when they're talented. And so I'd have to mend that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to get at a little bit more of what kind of personality do you sort of rub up against? What's difficult for you?
It really depends. I try. Let me just think for a second. Sorry.
Take your time.
Because I think in turn that also talks about where your own personal
Biases are, yeah.
Yeah, biases and what you wish you could do better.
Sure. I think I can say this because he retired, that, Mr. Butler, who I love, we butt heads quite a few times. I think he would agree. If he was sitting right next to me, he would say we had some probably over-the-top shouting matches that got really heated about certain things. And he is strong-willed and really smart and had strong opinions about whatever the case may be. And it festered, and I didn't, we literally, it was like we broke up in high school. Like I would walk by him in the hallway, we weren't speaking for a couple of weeks, and then we'd have sort of a yelling match, and then it was okay. And then, to his credit, he used to be my teacher, by the way, we sat down and talked about it. But it would happen, we'd have arguments and disagreements on things about what policy or protocol or what we should do with certain kids, or why a kid's missing his class, or whatever it was. So We have a lot of disagreements in the middle school. I think that's part of what we've established. If people disagree with me, that's okay. I don't have all the right answers, and sometimes I'm wrong. And come into the office and let's talk about it. So I am okay with things like that as long as it's coming from a good place. As long as you're passionate about the student learning, about the kids. But he and I butt heads. Yeah, if that's what you're looking for. I mean, and it wasn't always easy, but I knew he was a great teacher, and I think he had a lot of respect for me, and it ended up being fine. So you got to be able to disagree and then move on too.
So do you think that you guys were butting heads because he was strong-willed?
Absolutely.
Or,
And so am I.
okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I want to dovetail on that in a similar way. The five of us are pretty darn strong-willed. You, as the leader, sometimes have to make decisions that we will wholeheartedly disagree with.
Yeah.
But as I say all the time, the only person we hire is the superintendent. Although I can always will make the argument about the business manager, but that's for a different day. So how would you talk to us? Because at the end of the day, when you're sitting up here as superintendent, you're really running the show.
Right.
We are here to ask questions, to offer guidance, but at the end of the day, you're running the show. This is your district.
Yeah.
It stops with you. Good, bad, indifferent, it stops with you.
Yeah.
So how would you go from, and I think we were asked earlier, but I want to tease this out a little bit because it's really important. You go from a principal of one building to you run the show. Not only do you run the show in the other three buildings, but you run the show here with the five of us who are elected. And again, we're all strong-willed. We all have sometimes our own agendas.
Of course.
But we vote, and the majority does rule here.
Right.
So how would you not only deal with us, but just deal with this whole? It's kind of a different world.
Yeah.
And by the way, before you say that, it's absolutely not a negative because we have a current superintendent who kind of did the same thing. Superintendent Angelakis grew into the role.
Yeah.
And she didn't know what she didn't know initially.
Yeah, I mean, I am all for healthy debate, and I've never shied away from difficult conversations or shied away from competition or, anything that could be construed as negative. I actually don't look at it as a negative. You have your 5 opinions, 6 with Sam, 7 with Noel. I think we all need to come to the table and talk about those things. If we disagree, sort of like what happens every single day. Like, we can all collaborate in school. Ultimately, it's my call.
Right.
And so I would say the same thing here, that, you can all have your opinions and I can have mine, but it would be my call if I got the job. So, and I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I don't think you can have the job that I've had for the last 13 years and you can't make everybody happy. And I couldn't possibly poll every single person in Swampscott with every single decision I make on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Nor could I call the 5 of you. It couldn't work that way. So I think that respectful dialogue and hopefully disagreeing without being disagreeable is things that we can sort of lay as a foundation. But as long as the core values of, are we doing what's best for kids? Are we moving the district forward? If that's at the forefront of everybody's mind, then let's talk about it and hash it out.
Great. Thank you.
Actually, can I?
Absolutely.
So, Jason, and I appreciate that response. I think what I've been hearing through Glenn's question and some of the others is, what attributes would make you effective if you were offered the role? If you were here or you were in, administering over the 3 schools. So just coming back to that concept of, what would make you effective? I know the current superintendent participates in some, I don't know if it's regional consortiums, local consortiums with the other superintendents. And what I've heard you say, you mentioned Ms. Otto coming to you with, hey, I got some ideas, and students coming to you with ideas, others coming to you with ideas, and it's like, all right, let's talk about it. And I think that's a great attribute to have. Is that something, that consortium, I know, again, the current superintendent does participate, but, going to that and, with that mindset that you've talked about here and saying, I want to bring back some things that I think would help this district, and being open to do that and, coming back and talking about those things.
Of course. I would say as a principal, I'm part of a roundtable as well. And it is so valuable just to see people's ideas. What are they going through? How did you start an enrichment block? How did you do this? There's a million things that come through there. Mostly now it's like, does anybody have a math teacher? Does anybody have a science teacher? But it's been invaluable. So I would love to be part of that same association. And I think that branching outside of just Swampscott, I would be naive to think that all the great ideas are here. I think there's very talented people in the room. And like I said before, Pam has put us in such a great position with such a strong leadership team. But, there's amazing minds out there as well. So I would like to tap into all possible resources to make sure that we're hearing ideas and talking about them and seeing if they work for us. Now, some ideas sound great on paper, and then when you implement them, they're either not practical, or you rob Peter to pay Paul and you didn't realize that something else went down a level because you added this program or this situation. And then we have to be smart enough to say, all right, we tried it, it didn't work, let's try something else. And you have to be able to admit that, or else, again, how do you grow and how do you take risks if you think that you're locked into them always?
Great, thank you. Karen?
How would you work with all stakeholders in developing and implementing school improvement plans across the district?
Yeah, so school councils are vital to that. We have, I think, getting participation, my guess, I don't know if this is true, my guess is as you get to high school, maybe the participation, maybe it's like PTO where you don't have the same amount of people sort of jumping to be part of your school council. But that goes to, we need the community, we need people on board to get the message about what we need to identify strengths and weaknesses in the district. And when it is a weakness, how do we solve it? And you can't do that in a vacuum. So you have to have all stakeholders at the table, and we need participation. And part of that's that family engagement piece that I talked about before, that the more we can bring families in and the more we can have them as part of the solution. If they're upset about something, then let's hear them out and see if we can come up with a solution. Or if they see something as a relative weakness, okay, let's identify it. Let's see if it's actually isn't a relative weakness, and let's try to make improvements. So I think it's vital. Not only would I want to do that, I think you have to do that because it's vital to make any sort of change.
True.
Can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
So I know some of the people on your school council, not everybody though. Who do you pick to be on your school council, and how do you pick them?
So we just send an email out and say who wants in,
Yeah.
and then when nobody responds, we start following up with some calls. So we've really had some people, one of the people doesn't even have a kid there anymore. So we just have,
Yeah. Do you invite people onto your council who you disagree with, or who you could have?
a lot of the time, they don't even know who I am,
Yeah.
so when they start. And
Oh,
so
okay.
it's part of, same with the PTO. I think the reason why it's good to have those people come in here is say, all right, I'm gonna come to a PTO meeting. We have random people show up at a PTO meeting. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
Usually it's the same
See-
3, 4, 5 people, but sometimes somebody new will come in, and I love that, because it's like, okay, so now you can hear about our values, what we want in the district, what we're doing for your kid, and how we plan on being successful. And if you disagree or have an idea or heard something, I want to hear it. I think the parent coffees that we talked about before, as far as bringing the families in, I think the first one had 40 people, and the last one had 1. But that's okay. People you give them the opportunity to come in and have discussions, and if we disagree, again, it's okay to disagree as long as we have a plan in place that we're being respectful, and we also are doing something about it. I just don't want to argue for the sake of arguing. I want to have a plan in place and the school councils are really important in that role.
I just want to do a quick shout out to the elementary school PTO. I had an opportunity last Thursday to visit with them. There were 45 odd 50 people there.
That's amazing.
So it was great. It really
Yeah.
was. Suzanne.
I have a quick follow-up question, then another question. But when talking about technology, didn't touch on elementary school at all, and I just want just a basic philosophy of when kids should have those iPads and what amount of screen time should they have in elementary school.
I think in
and
short,
and kind of what we have right now. In relation.
to be honest with you, I don't know how often they're on the iPads during the school day. I'd have to get in there and talk to Ms. Sanborn. I would say that I personally wouldn't want them to just be, I get nervous about the middle school being all Chromebooks, to be honest with you. Despite never mind the cost of how they break and things like that, but it definitely is alarming. I would say the further we can push that, I mean, whether you're on an iPad in kindergarten, or I think we can wait till they're a little bit older. I wouldn't want them on there all day. I think they need paper pencil. I think they need to be hands-on. I think they need to be, you know, we want kids to want to go to recess and not want to be on their iPad. So, you know, I feel the same way as a parent. Like, I wouldn't want my kids on screens all day.
All right.
So,
I just wanted to hear that. But
yeah.
I want to switch to the high school and talk about discipline and your thoughts about discipline at the high school and social justice and some alternative types of discipline rather than expelling or really punitive things.
Yeah.
And at the high school.
Yeah, I think suspension, I mean, if you look at our suspension rates, we've found that there's no discrepancy between, you know, different groups, and it's very minimal. Like, I sometimes suspending kids is, what did you just do? Like, you're now on your iPad or on PlayStation or whatever it is at home. You know, I want kids in school. So unless it's really severe, I mean, of course, if there's a fight or something, you can't be here. If there's something that's racially charged or anti-Semitic or homophobic, like, you can't be here right now. You got to go. But let's come back. Let's do the work to make sure that it's not just punitive, that you know, we have the knock questions at the middle school where if a kid does something like that, they have to, when they come back, they have to answer all these questions that we have about what was the intent, what was the impact, how would you have done things differently, did you realize the words you said? And, you know, I'd be lying to you if I said sometimes they weren't just like buzzing through it, but I do think it's valuable and they need to sit for a second. And, you know, discipline is, nobody's looking to be punitive. I mean, it's the same, it's like, you know, has timeout ever worked for any parent, or is that just me that it doesn't work for? Like, timeout doesn't really work. So I would say detention and things like that, you have to have detention because you have to have people respecting the building. If you show disrespect to the building or disrespect to the teacher or disrespect to a classmate, there's a consequence. But that's not the end goal. The end goal is to, like, well, why did that happen? And how do we not do it again? How do you learn so that to be a valuable member of the society and not do it again? So, you know, I would much rather kids be in school than suspended. Do I think you need detention to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing? Sure, yeah. And then you have to look at your suspension rates and you have to look at your detention to see, all right, are the discrepancies there, which I think you're alluding to, right? Is that, like, is one group of kids being punished more than another? I think that's something that you'd have to check and look at the data on that.
Great, thank you. Sam, do you have another question?
I was going to ask about, obviously right now, being the middle school principal, you have, you know, a very strong connection with all the students. I think, were you to take this position at a greater level, but especially with the high school, how would you sort of, I don't want to say initiate because obviously you have experience with all these kids, but
Yeah.
it's at a different level. How would you sort of, you know, aim to maintain a good relationship with students? Obviously you have me and Noel as student representatives, but, you know, more generally, what do you foresee in, like, sort of that area of your job?
Yeah. Well, I think that strong connections with kids is so important. I think I need to hear your ideas and what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
I would love to meet with every class several times a year. Just, you know how we used to do that in the little theater,
Yeah,
back in the, same thing, you know, let's talk about some of the issues, let's talk about expectations. I'd like to be really transparent and open about what I see as our values and work with you and Noel and other student leaders to see if we're all on the same page and then make sure that the students are part of the process. But also, you know, I know myself, I would need to still have those meetings and making sure that kids know who I am and want to come to me with problems. And I want to be part of the solution, not like, oh, well, go to the principal. Like, no, this is why I chose education. I want to help in the process, K to 12. And one of the things that we say always is, like, listen, they're all our kids. If a kid has something that happens when they're in 11th grade or 12th grade or kindergarten, like, they're all our kids. It's all our problem. It's the things that we want to, just like, you know, when the high school won the blue ribbon thing, we all celebrated. It was all of us. You know, when the 8th grade had tremendous MCAS scores this year, that wasn't just the 8th grade. That was K to 8. And the same thing when kids are going to colleges or choosing the career that they want to, or going to the armed forces. Like, we should all celebrate those things, because they're all our kids. But back to your question, I think that those meetings with each grade would be really important.
I agree.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Sam. John?
So Jason, I want to come back to something you said a few minutes ago about, you said if something wasn't working, we'll admit, hey, it's not working, and make a course correction. And I think that's a great philosophy. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think kind of with that response, I think what I'm hearing you say is, as part of kind of your tone from the top, you're encouraging your senior leadership team, the principals, to escalate those things that may not be working, that as appropriate, but,
Yeah.
Up to the superintendent level for discussion. Did I hear that correctly?
Of course. I mean, listen, like I said before, I mean, I know, without getting in there so much, that I know the hot button topic is the high school schedule. Like, we made a change, and I'm sure there's pros, I'm sure there's some cons. I've heard from both ends. I think we need to look at that again and see, how's it impacting time on learning? How's it impacting attendance? I mean, change for the sake of change isn't what we want to do. We need to look at what we've done. Is it working? And like I said, not be afraid to say, okay, it didn't turn out quite how we thought. Let's get back to the drawing board. Yeah.
Great. I think what I have learned from Superintendent Angelakis and folks before her is a superintendent can't do it all. There's only so many hours in the day, and the delegation of duties and responsibilities, even though it does rest with you at the end of the day, is vital. I mean, you can't attend every meeting.
Right.
You can't meet with every parent. I mean, I will say one of the things, the chain of command, where if there is a challenge, is really important.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about, how you would delegate those duties down.
I mean, I think my expectation level would be that the principals handle things sort of how I handle them now. That, they're going to have to be have the final say at the building level. If things escalate, of course, I would have to get involved. But I think, being a principal is a really difficult job, and there's a lot of responsibility, and sometimes you're not, same thing, you're saying things that people don't like or that's not popular, and that's part of the job. So I would be really clear about expectations, about the fact that, the chain of command starts with them and then would escalate up if need be.
Okay, great.
And if I have if I have the right people in place,
Right.
and, Pam has set such a great team up, I don't foresee that being a major issue, but certainly, I like to get my hands dirty and get involved in things, so if need be, I'd get involved.
Sure. If we could, everybody, one more question apiece?
So-
Amy, you're up.
I see one of the advantages of hiring from within, the ability to spend between now and the time that our superintendent leaves as sort of a really long runway.
Yeah.
So, and also just grateful for the fact that we have so many, such a strong team. That said, in your eyes, what would you see over the next 8 months or 9 months as what do you want to develop in yourself for the role?
Do you mean as a leader, or just as far as the, like the ins and outs of things?
Yes.
Both?
Yeah.
Ins and outs of things. I mean, honestly, I've been coming to school committee meetings for like years, and I love doing it. It's so interesting. But sometimes the process stuff, I'm like, wait, when are you allowed to speak, and when is the vote, and things like that. But that's small stuff. I mean, I'll figure that out. I think delegation is going to be something that I would really need to work on and see how Pam does that. Just back to Gwen's question before. I think she does an excellent job of putting people that she trusts in positions to make decisions. But I also know, how I am, and I think I would have to step back a little bit in certain areas to make sure that, I'm trusting people to make those decisions and be okay with
That's an
that.
important part of the leadership, is not just trusting people to do it, but allowing for risk.
Mhm.
Allowing people to take risks and not necessarily being punitive
when it doesn't work out, of course.
Right.
Of course. I mean, that's similar to, Emily or Lori or whoever was the assistant principal at the time, the same thing. Like, the first year together, we're working together, you're getting to know each other. And then each year, it's like the rope gets bigger. And now, Emily could run whatever she wants to run. So it's not, but it takes trust and it takes time, it takes collaboration, it takes like really showing each other that you care and where you're coming from. And when you disagree, having those open and honest conversations, that then you say, all right, I trust their judgment and it's going to be fine.
Karen?
So just to summarize, so your answer to her question is that for the next 8 month, your eight months, let's say, your priority is to see, to sort of see and understand using your team.
Well, yeah, what she
Right.
takes on, what she passes up.
Right, but I'm just, so how about getting yourself up to speed on budget stuff? Like, how familiar are you, I know you've seen the budget,
Yeah,
obviously, but
yeah.
like, how familiar are you with like how it works and the cost centers we use and how Cheryl does things? Like, how comfortable are you with sort of that?
I'm comfortable, but obviously there's room to grow, and I meet with, so a few years ago, I was asking all these questions, because what happened was, so my first year as principal, I think we had budget cuts and we had to get rid of teachers, and then I was like, well, that's over. And then it happened again, and again, and again, I was like, I need to really understand where this is coming from. So then I started, calculating my own retirements and what we've saved in hires and sending them to Pam, and finally she was just like, you need to go, you need to go meet with Cheryl. And she's been invaluable. Just learning the process, going line item by line item to see what's important and what we can afford, quite frankly. So, I'm comfortable with the process. I'm comfortable with, I sat in those presentations and afterwards I would look at her slideshows. I don't know how many times she presented the budget last year, but every time I was like, ooh, I learned something new. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that as well, and working with the town government to making sure that we're getting what we deserve and what we need. Yeah.
So you can commit to already starting to sort of do that work alongside.
Of course, yeah, and to be honest, I already have started with Cheryl, but I think that would be a prime example of something that I would use in the next 8 months for.
Great. Karen?
What support do you think you would need from us, from the school committee, that first year, if you were to get the role?
I would say just, I'm not implying that anybody's I would just say, like, honestly, if you're upset with something or if you have a different idea, instead of talking about it, like, come see me and let's figure it out. And I guess transparency. I guess I would want transparency, that if there's an issue, come talk to me. And if there's something that a decision I made that you weren't happy with, let's talk about it and see why it was made and how we could have done it differently. But transparency and just having an open line of communication would be a huge step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I
Yeah.
think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, typically, you come to the meetings, or you have, most of your contact would be with the chair, whoever the chair is at the time. But, it's usually sort of up to the superintendent whether they want to hear from other members, or if you wanna keep it through the chair. But, the first year I would think would be a little bit interesting because there's such a learning curve.
Yeah.
And, I would hope that whoever came into the role would lean on the committee as much as they needed.
Yeah, I would guess that I would want to hear from all 5 of you. And obviously you go through the chair and go through the right channels, but if somebody has an idea or a question or concern, let's talk about it. Yeah.
I think that'd be a really good thing, again, just going back to just the vast knowledge that all of us have. Suzanne?
So I feel like I know what your answer is going to be, but I think that maybe if you can talk about some situational things, but how do you handle the both blatant and subtle instances of bigotry or anti-Semitism or gender bullying? Some of those.
Yeah. So I don't know what you think my answer is going to be, but let's see what happens. So I think that everything we do has to be incredibly intentional, setting expectations with kids, making sure they know, their intent and their impact? Have we, despite the fact that we do those safety and respect meetings 3 times a year, despite the fact that there's a massive Holocaust unit in the 8th grade, despite the fact that we take them to DC, to the Holocaust Museum, do we still have things that happen? Of course. Despite the books that we read and book club and what we put on our walls and the back to those meetings again, do we have racial incidents? Absolutely. Do we have, unfortunate things that happen despite best efforts? Of course that's going to happen. And I think what we have to do is keep having those meetings and keep having those discussions about expectations and what's right and what's wrong, and making sure that when things do happen, students, again, understand their impact on the society, on the school, on the individual that they harmed. But it's all encompassing. It's the books we read, it's what's on our walls, it's how we talk to each other, it is hearing from families. So I think that, do I think that every single middle school kid, say, or even high school kid that makes a mistake, or I shouldn't say that makes a really bad mistake and says something homophobic or transphobic or racial or anti-Semitic, do I think that means they're those things? Not always, not most of the time. I think they make angry mistakes and say things they shouldn't say, but they need to. But that's not good enough. That's not just like, okay, well then it's fine because you didn't mean it. I think that they need to do a lot of work and say about the impact and restoring the harm that was done, which sometimes, quite frankly, is impossible to, depending on what happened.
How about the victim? Like, how are you handling, and not just the perpetrator, but the person who's been victimized by the behavior?
Yeah, I would say that probably every single time something happens since I've been principal, I'm calling the families immediately, meeting with the kid. I don't want any surprises. If something happens at school, you're not going home and telling your mom or dad, like, they're going to hear from me first. And one, expressing how we don't stand for what just happened. That's not part of our values. That's not part of what we do here. You can hear teachers all over the middle school saying, we don't do that here, we don't do that here. But when it escalates to that level, the kids know that they messed up a lot of times. But the victim and the victim's families need to know that we're here to support them. We want to give them whatever time they need, whatever resources they need to get back in school, be able to learn, and try to work through the process of what just happened, because it's really hard sometimes. I mean, it depends on the individual case of what happened. Like, you asked that question, a million things, have gone through my mind of things that have happened in the last 13 years that, God, I can't believe that after all the time we spent on talking about what not to do, you still did it. So I think that's important to really make sure that the victim feels supported, even though a mistake was made.
Sam, do you have a final question?
I have no further questions, no.
Okay, thank you. John?
So, Jason, I'm actually kind of following up on a couple of the more recent questions. So, just in the 8-month runway, if offered the role that you would have, you talked about some of the things that you'd be doing, and Karen had asked about, how can the school committee help, the future superintendent to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
I think in your responses, I think part of what I was hearing is you're open to new approaches, and I think what I heard you say is even how, presentations to the school committee or what you're presenting or how it's presented, during that 8-month runway, you're kind of open to, if you have thoughts on, ways to improve that process, you're willing to share those, correct?
Of course, yeah. And like I said, working with Pam, I think probably since I started, especially once I gained her trust, I think that we've talked a lot about different approaches and different ideas. And sometimes she's like, no, because I might not know what the repercussions are or something else, as a building principal for the last few years. Well, we should do this or we should do that. Yeah, but this means X, Y, and Z. So I'm certainly open to discussing new approaches with Pam. Like I said, part of her leadership style that I really respect is the fact that she's open to that type of dialogue. And I think it would be really important to have those discussions.
Great. Well, then I think with that, what do you have for us? Do you have any questions?
I do.
Anything to add for
I do.
us?
So, I think I know what you're going to say, but what are the most essential qualities you seek in your next superintendent? What do you think the top?
Karen?
What? Put me on the spot. A good leader, someone who, especially if it was someone internal such as yourself, someone who can learn for the next 7, 8 months, but then still be their own person once they take over.
Right.
That's what I would be looking for.
Yeah?
I am looking for somebody who rallies our employees and makes this a place where they want to come to work, so that our kids want to come to school.
Yeah.
And I think it's I would also want to see somebody who really brings, sort of challenges themselves to always be looking at, well, are we doing this because this is how it's done? Or are we doing this because it makes sense?
Right.
Because I think that that's one of the difficulties about hiring from within is that, you know, we've all been here a long time. So I'm looking forward to somebody who can challenge themselves as well as all leadership.
Right. Suzanne, anything to add?
I think along with that, and being inspirational or a role model that you know, as the leader that other people are seeing, that you're the hardest working person in the district, and you know, they follow suit.
Yeah.
But I also think a really important characteristic is the ability to know what you don't know, and to surround yourself with people who have opposite talents that you have, and different knowledge that you have, and that you truly rely on them. And I think you're starting with a great team. I mean, if you had Dr. Bacon and Mrs. Raymond and Ms. Stella to guide you, I think that the ability to listen to that advice always, and then your principals as well, but there's a really solid team here, and I think to continue to surround yourself with people that challenge you, they're smart people that challenge you, that you listen to, I think is a very important characteristic of a leader.
Will you agree, John?
So, Jason, I think it would be someone who sets a strong tone from the top, so everybody understands, you know, what your expectations are. And I think also a key attribute is someone who's willing to listen to different ideas, maybe not popular ones, but has that capability to listen.
Right, and I will completely agree with Suzanne, is really know what you don't know. And, you know, just be willing to just be a sponge to learn, and at the same time you're learning is a leadership quality that we require. What else do you have for us?
Well, talk about measuring success here. How do you measure success in this role? I mean, we can talk about school measurements and all the metrics, but what do you view as success with your next superintendent?
All right, I'll take that one. It's really interesting that you asked that question. We are in the midst of scheduling a goal session for us, and that goal session will lead us to review really in total the survey that we sent out, and then that will lead to setting your goals. And that's something that we as a group really just haven't done for a while. I think it could be part COVID, could be part just the experience that Pam had, and I think Amy will agree that we've fallen down by not doing that. So I think for me, it's setting goals and expectations that you can meet and achieve, but it's going to what the district goals are. So to me, it's I want to have success with as many children as possible. Whatever they do, whatever kind they are, they feel welcomed, respected, and have that ability to find something. You're mentioning the club, the Taylor Swift, whatever that is on all levels, from pre-K to senior in high school to the special ed students who stay until they're 22. Everybody has a stake in what the goals are. So that's important to me. Anybody else?
Can I add to that a little bit?
Of course.
So, you know, there's a pretty well-developed process for all superintendents on how to evaluate for success. And it does begin with, you know, a pretty, you know, a grid that we come up with collaboratively with the superintendent that focuses first on what those goals are that we've set, and that has to be a collaboration. But then, so it ties in, so what kinds of things are going to identify as success in that? So, you know, for example, you know, I'm thinking about one of the goals that we set for the superintendent a few years ago was especially about helping all sorts of kids. And so one of her goals was to reinstate some of the more hands-on learning in schools. So, you know, like building the, you know, the After Dark program. So that was actually one of her goals, because we really have to, it has to be a measurable thing and not subjective. And then, you know, on a year-to-year basis, we go through that. And, you know, I think especially for those of us who've been here since pre-COVID, because things really took a dive during COVID in terms of evaluations and getting back to that. And, you know, it's also very different evaluating a first-year superintendent than evaluating a 10th-year superintendent. So, you know, I think that what it says to the school committee is that we have to bring back more rigor because, you know, we'll be back at one.
Right,
again.
right.
Right. Anyone else want to answer that question?
No, I agree with,
Yeah.
Okay.
In the committee's eyes, what are the position's biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities?
Can you just repeat the question one more time?
In the committee's eyes, what are the position's biggest challenges and biggest opportunities? Could be the same thing.
Balancing the budget to meet the goals, and what everyone needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Budget is just, I think, our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, I understand from, you know, the town side, but at the same time, that's not our responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, our responsibility is to teach the community students, and it's not inexpensive.
Yeah.
So it's to me, that's the biggest challenge is budget, and then you know, making sure you go back to the high school. You know, if there are some things that haven't worked, let's change them. And that goes to all grade levels.
Of course.
But I think it's exacerbated at the high school, because I think we hear about it the most. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's really what you hear about. You hear about high school graduation, you know, high school sports, and so it's just more out there for the committee and the community at large.
I'll tell you from the survey, this is the community response. What's going to be a successful year is going to be an updated, clear plan for the middle school and what that's going to look like, because that's a building that needs to be taken care of. Communication and transparency is going to be valued in a successful school year. The high school is having a strong high school leadership, smaller class sizes, civics, teachers' morale. The high school came up quite a few times in what a successful year would look like. And then teachers and keeping class sizes small.
Yep.
So those are the four things that you know, sort of we look at from the survey that were important to the community, that will ultimately also be important to us.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I think it's funny you said maybe they're the same thing, because that's exactly how I thought of it. They were actually the same thing, and I think by that I mean, you know, if offered the role, Jason, that, you know, succeeding a long-time successful superintendent, that's challenging, but there's also the opportunity to make the role your own if you were offered the role.
Right.
So I think, you know, it cuts both ways.
Great.
I was gonna say the same thing. Transitions are always tricky, but they can be really great. There's a lot of opportunity in there that we can't even see right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, especially because this district is stable.
Right.
Right.
And
there
there's
isn't
such
the
a,
chaos that we're
right.
seeing in other
Right.
districts.
Right. And there is chaos across the college.
Yeah.
We're very lucky.
Yeah.
So with that, any last thoughts or comments for us?
Well, I guess I would like to thank you for your time, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think that hopefully you realize that over the course of 13 years here and 23 years overall in education, that I have a vast amount of different experiences in different locations with different types of students in different areas. And, you know, my goal was always to come back here. When I chose to come back here and raise my family here, it was about the schools. And when I chose to take the job, it was about making the schools the best possible schools they could be. And if it wasn't good enough for my kids, it wasn't good enough for your kids. And we are all in this together, and I want this community to realize that we do have a gem of a school system, and we have to keep it that way and keep improving. And I want to be part of that solution and part of the process to make sure that Swampscott Public Schools are not just on the rise in some metric from Boston Magazine, but on the rise that you can feel it in the fabric of the community each day when kids are going to school and they're coming home happy and learning. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
So much. So just for everyone in attendance and on the Zoom, we're going to take a quick, it's 7:57, so we're going to take maybe a 7-minute break. We're going to come back. We are going to allow public comment. If you're in the room and you do want to comment, I do ask that you sign your name on the paper. If you're online, just please raise your hand. We will get to you. We'll talk about just how we're going to handle that. Again, Jason, thank you so much, and we'll see everybody in about 5 minutes.
sure that everybody.
Great. All right, we are back. Thank you for everyone in the room who stayed with us. Again, anyone who is online, please raise your hand. I do want to say that if you do want to make a comment in the room, please sign up online. I will ask that we keep our comments to a couple minutes, 2 minutes, 3 max. If you do make a comment, ask a question of the school committee, we generally do not reply. We'd like to think about what you had to say and don't want to give an off-the-cuff answer. So why don't we start with, in the room, Suzanne, can you have the list
Oh, yeah.
there? Thank you.
First one is Mrs. Powers.
Feeling very short.
And just identify yourself.
Good evening, everybody. It's a special pleasure to be here tonight to support the candidacy of my friend and colleague, Jason Kalishman, as the next superintendent of the Swampscott Public Schools. I'd be remiss if I failed to use this forum to formally express my respect, appreciation, and admiration for our current superintendent, Pam Angelakis. As someone who's been kicking around this district for over 30 years, it's especially poignant and exhilarating to ponder what I'm confident will be a seamless transition of the stewardship of our district. As a former member of the SMS faculty and during my current tour of duty as Dean of Students at the Swampscott Elementary School, I've had the unique privilege of working with Jason in his varied leadership positions, first as assistant principal, later in his current role as principal, and most recently as one of my own professional mentors. Without question, Jason has been an impactful leader in the Swampscott Public Schools. I'm a tad biased, but because of Jason's leadership, there is little doubt that the Swampscott Middle School is the flagship school in our district and a model to which this new Swampscott Elementary School will emulate. Jason is at heart a highly skilled educator, well-versed in educational theory, instructional practice, and most importantly, strategies to address the social-emotional needs of every student. He demonstrates his interpersonal strengths, or shall I say his charm, during his daily interactions with students and teachers alike. He's worked hard to create a nurturing learning community, and he's knowledgeable about learning styles, and he demonstrates his respect for the art of teaching and the uniquenesses of every child. SMS continues to be a warm and welcoming home away from home for everyone. Long before schools across the country were scrambling to address learning loss and crafting plans to re-engage students in the post-COVID era, Jason had already embraced the prerequisite focus on social-emotional wellness for his middle school students. His prioritizing greater awareness and responsiveness to the emotional health of students challenged the middle school faculty to re-examine our classroom practice and philosophy. These efforts have translated into a vibrant, child-centered school. Always visible and accessible, Jason is rarely confined to the 4 walls of his office. Truth be told, if you want to find Jason, you best look in classrooms or hallways or the gym or the cafeteria. There you will find him doing what he does best, making connections and building relationships. Ever supportive to faculty and staff, his door is always open for dialogue, conversation, or consultation. He shows good judgment and wisdom when he speaks and when he is silent. When appropriate, he's flexible and accommodating, and when necessary or required, he's resolved in his decision-making. Those of us who know him well can attest to Jason's wonderful, joy-filled sense of humor. To his credit, he uses these qualities as an effective tool for communicating with students and for creating a positive learning community. His appreciation for the whole child well explains why students and parents hold Jason in such high regard. As evidenced by Jason's putting his candidacy forward, it's no surprise that his high expectations for his students and staff mirror the goals he sets for himself. His resume well documents his willingness to establish new goals for himself and to explore and apply his considerable talents in various venues. Over the years, Jason and I have frequently mused about the state of the world, the state of the Red Sox, and most importantly, the state of public education. During one of our many afternoon chats, I can recall asking Jason what he believed to be the most consequential ask of a good building leader. Without missing a beat, Jason named the impact of the selection and retention of good classroom teachers. I would argue that he put that conviction into practice, and the results are noteworthy and laudable. So in that spirit, I respectfully ask the Swampscott School Committee to follow Jason's lead and give the same thoughtful care and consideration in selecting our next superintendent of schools. There is no doubt in my mind, and in that of many, many others in this community, that there is no one more capable of carrying the baton forward than our own Jason Kalishman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Powers. Mr. Ford.
So, hello. I'm not going to be quite as eloquent as Mrs. Powers, but nonetheless, I'm currently on my fourth child at the middle school. I have,
And just introduce yourself, please.
what's it?
Just
Introduce yourself.
please.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, Joe Ford, thank you. I've had a child at the middle school for 11 years straight currently, and sad to say I'll be leaving the middle school after this year, at least my children will be. And up until this year, I was a PTO president at the middle school, so consider myself to be a pretty good source of what it's been like to interact with Mr. Kalishman on a regular basis. There probably isn't many parents in the town of Swampscott that have dealt with Jason on a regular basis as much as I have. And I just want to say that I think we have a unique opportunity to hire somebody from within. I've hired a lot of people over the years. I own my own business. I've hired hundreds of people. And what I say is that we can teach somebody how to be a superintendent, in my case, be a painter. We can't teach someone how to be a good person, generally. Either they are or they aren't. And we have somebody here who, through the last 2 hours has sat in front of all of you. You know that Jason is being sincere and honest when he answers you because you've lived this with him. You've lived all these experiences with him. He's not an unknown. He's not somebody that we have to be afraid of that came in here and pulled the wool over our eyes. We know if Jason is being sincere, and I think that he sat through the previous 2 hours, was probably a little uncomfortable in the beginning, as anybody would be, but as time went on, he looked really comfortable. He was sincere, and I just think that we would be doing the children of Swampscott a disservice if we do not hire him. I know a lot of people I don't know of a lot of people, but some people have mentioned lack of experience. Why don't we hire somebody that has superintendent's experience? I think we have a great support staff here to help teach Jason. He's willing to take on a challenge that not many people would. I know that I've spoken with him about my fear of him being in his own town. That doesn't seem to be a concern of his, which I think is very courageous. He knows I think he has an idea of what's coming his way, and he's willing still to stick his neck out. And I just can't say enough good things about my experience with Jason. He collaborates with people. He's grown over the last, 11 years that I've seen him. He is willing to admit when he's wrong, which is hard for people to do. Not a lot of people will sit in a room and say, I was wrong, I'm sorry. It's a very simple thing in theory to do, but not a lot of people can do it. I've experienced him doing it. I've witnessed him doing it. And those of you that know me know that if I had a problem with Jason Kalishman, I would have spoken up. And, for me to be here publicly just tells you how much I think this is the right decision. And please just make it happen. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Woodfork.
My name is Nelson Woodfork, and I've been living in this town temporarily for about 50 years. I've had 4 kids go through the school system. 3 of them went from first grade on up, and 1 was a child we brought in at age 16. The system has done very well by me and my family. I've known Jason probably longer than anybody else in this room currently, starting off with Little League Baseball and watching him go through that he's the same age as my second child, all the way up through high school basketball, as baseball, and watching him grow athletically, and then coming back as a coach where he had to collaborate, though you're the bottom line when you're the head coach, on baseball strategies when he took over the team. That was an interesting process in a full circle. He also decided to reinstitute something that his high school coach had decided to do, which is to open and close against the prep, even though they are several divisions higher than us, because he was willing to take on that challenge. That says something. The delightful thing was listening to him tonight on the other side and watching how he has grown over the years to become who he is, leading the middle school. And I'm an old social worker, so the acknowledgement about mental health needs was right on target as far as I was concerned, because that's a tremendous problem. I've worked both in the private and for the state in that aspect. So the last thing I want to say, because the hour is getting late, is when I go to games now, and I love going to games, as some of you know, I don't know these kids. He knows all about them. I'll say, who is that? And he will give me both their strengths and weaknesses, more than just athletically, as human beings. So he does get to know those kids that have come up from the middle school, and sometimes I just need to know who they are, so that when the Ford kids appear, I get background on them. So that's all I've got to say. I think you've got to make a tremendous decision, but he's a great candidate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodfork. Ms. Miller.
Hello, my name is Leanne Miller, and I have a daughter in 11th grade, and I have a daughter out of district in 9th grade. My daughter that went out of district went out for 6th grade. I am not going to be a popular person here tonight, but I am going to give you my honest opinion here. I also am in charge of helping run the CPAC, okay? So I have one in special ed. So there are 2 types of families within Swampscott. When I moved here, my younger one was in 1st grade and my older one was in 3rd grade. And I learned very quickly there are 2 types of families in this town. There are the generational families and there are new families, and they are never to mix. And that is how our family has been treated, and that is not just my family. Every family that I know that has moved here, that has started their children after kindergarten or even in kindergarten with the younger ones, have not been accepted into this community the way the generational families have. And you know what I'm talking about when I say generational families. Now, as far as the culture that Mr. Kalishman was talking about at the middle school, there is a culture. And I can tell you, I know several kids that have gone through that school, my own daughter, as well as my younger daughter's friends, because I'm still
involved with them because I'm involved with Girl Scouts as well. And the kids that are now, my younger daughter is now in high school, so all her friends are now in the high school. And I asked them how their year is going, because I've seen all of them. And they're like, it's wonderful. I am so happy to be at the high school. It's so much better than the middle school. I was, had difficulty in the middle school, but now it's just so much better in the high school. And I'm going to tell you, all these kids are in the honors program. I'm not telling you that this is kids in special ed, although I do know kids in special ed that are still doing better in high school. Okay, there is definitely a difference between what you heard here tonight and what my family has experienced and what others have experienced in the middle school. Okay, so I do want you to take that as an issue of caution. He asked what he could have done better. When my daughter was in 5th grade, we were in COVID, and it was the year that everybody was hybrid. And she was sitting on her Zoom, everybody was Zoom, and the teacher, one of her teachers, was standing there, and a new student was coming over from Nahant, and the teacher had said, "Oh, I think the child is on an IEP." My daughter was on an IEP, she still is, and she was so angry, like, "Oh, you can't say that, da-da-da," the whole 9 yards. I contacted the school, and my daughter did as well. And I did get a response. It was not a pleasant response, it was dealt with internally. My daughter never received an apology, and I think that was a real miss on that part. She really felt totally isolated within that community. And so I really do caution the whole thing. I want you to see it from another side. I know you're seeing a lot of everybody loves them and everything. That's generational families, so I really do want you to see the other side of what goes on within this school district. As far as special ed goes, I've got a lot to say, but I do want to also, some of it is I want you to think about how you deal with special ed in the middle school more than anything, because the schedule is so set. Students lose certain classes to gain their special needs. That's a miss, and I think the school district really needs to work on that, because you now have, my daughter was taken out of social studies or history to get her extra help, but now in 8th grade, she had to take an MCAS for social studies. She didn't get it in 5th grade. That's what part of it was on. That's a misstep, and I think that, I know it's something that has to work on. One of the things is they all need access to all the curriculum, and that curriculum is taken away from them. Okay, so I know you're working within a certain amount of hours. Maybe that's something that needs to look at as well. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm just telling you an experience that is happening in the school district. And that's what I just want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Arrington. Katie, when you're done, just toss your email address here when you're done. Absolutely. Thank you.
Katie Arrington. I have 2 children. I have a kindergartner and I have a freshman. I'm here for the long haul. And I've emailed, I've come to this because as a generational family, I'm not for Kalishman as our next superintendent. If you have a special ed child, which I have my freshman and I have my kindergartner, then if your child is a normal learner, Kalishman's your guy. If your child has needs, I'm sorry, he's not. I do wish we had a more diverse pool of candidates. I understand the pros and cons for having an in-person that knows this town. I want the best for this town. I don't know that Principal Kalishman is it. Emily Zotto is a star at the middle school. I'm sure if she stepped into that role, the middle school would thrive. My child, who was here and wanted to speak but was nervous, worries about his sister because he felt ignored We spent all of middle school trying to get an IEP and services for him, and he was denied, and that, okay. But he then felt ostracized and ignored by Principal Kalishman. He is thriving at the high school. And is it perfect at the high school? Schedule, whatever, no. But he has found his stride here through the principal, through the guidance, through the 504 team. And I think this environment and this group is better. And I don't know that Principal Kalishman cares enough about the other learners in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arrington. Yeah, if you could, just for our records. That's good. No. Just let me remind everyone, if you're online and you'd like to ask a question and test our technical abilities, please raise your hand. Prior to that, I do want to just say, as we walked in, another resident, Joe Caponegro, who wanted to speak, had to run out. He did give us a letter in support of Mr. Kalishman. I'm not going to read the whole letter, but basically goes on to say his support. And I just want to say publicly thank you to Mr. Caponegro for doing that. Anyone out there? I see no hands. Going once, going twice. Okay.
You want to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. You just fill out the little form there for us?
Certainly.
You can do it when you're done.
Yeah.
My name is Kristen Baraselli. I have 2 children at the high school. I actually just wanted to address the process. I was the parent representative, excuse me, for another local public school system that went through a superintendent search, and I know it's messy and it takes a long time, and the pool of candidates is like a drop of water in a desert. I do think there is some due diligence to a superintendent search. I think it's lovely that there is an internal candidate, but at the same time, I feel like a search needs to be opened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You just, fill out the form. Thank you. I just, and thank you very much for writing that. To Ms. Miller and Ms. Arrington, it's never easy to make a comment that you think's not going to be popular. Thank you very much for making those comments. And I just want to speak for everybody here. We appreciate all the voices out there, and thank you for doing that. I know how difficult it is, especially from being a parent of a special education student. I get that. So we just wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that. All right, anyone else in the room? All right, I don't see anyone online. I want to thank everybody for listening, for joining us. And then I would like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor? We are out.